Hi, my name is Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. This is the Eclectic Reader Tag. I was kindly tagged by Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. I'll link Alice's channel down below, and the original tag was created by Cozy Reader Kelly. Okay, so we've got a few general questions and then we move into some specific genre-based recommendations. So question one is, where do you get your book recommendations? I get a lot of my book recommendations, like most of us I imagine, from YouTube. I also get recommendations from publishers' newsletters and from people in real life. So for example, at my reading group. Question two, how do you decide what to read next? So what I read next is largely dependent on the library holds that have come in on any given week and whether or not anyone has reserved that book after me. I keep all my unread library books on this top shelf here, and also on that shelf I move over any books that I own which I want to get to soon, so I remember to read them. Question three is, how have your reading tastes changed over time? I read more literary fiction nowadays than I did previously since watching BookTube, and I think that's just because I'm more aware of what's out there than I was previously. Question four, what genres or subgenres do you never or usually never read? So I don't read high fantasy really. I like books with some fantastical elements, but not necessarily like pure fantasy. I don't read a lot of romance, and certainly not light-hearted happy romance. Not that I would never do, but very rarely. It's not normally my kind of thing. Okay, and now we get into the meat of the tag. What are 5 specific subgenres you enjoy, and include a recommendation or 2 for each one? So I do have a couple of recommendations for each of the subgenres that I'm going to mention. I've gone fairly specific on some of these genres. So the first subgenre that I wanted to mention is locked room mysteries. It's a subgenre that I very much enjoy. A good example of this is The Mystery of the Yellow Room by Gaston Roux. So Gaston Roux famously wrote Phantom of the Opera. The Mystery of the Yellow Room is often lauded as one of the first locked room mysteries. And it features a woman who's been attacked inside a room which is locked from the inside. The Mystery of the Yellow Room is also often referenced in other works of crime fiction. So, for example, the Poirot novel The Clocks references it, and also The Hollow Man by Dickson Carr references it too. The Hollow Man I wanted to mention because this is probably John Dickson Carr's most famous book, featuring the detective Gideon Fell, and probably the reason why it is his most famous is because it features a chapter in which Gideon Fell talks extensively about locked room mysteries. And then the final book I wanted to mention in this genre, it's actually a short story, The Murders in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe, which is said to be the first example of detective fiction, and it does feature a locked room mystery, and possibly a solution which is kind of slightly ridiculous but still very enjoyable nonetheless. Okay, the next subgenre that I want to mention is one which I'm not entirely sure if it classifies as a subgenre. It's an aspect that's when it's in a book, I really enjoy it, but the 3 books I'm going to mention are, I think, in themselves different genres. What this thing is alternate realities. So I like books that feature alternate realities, parallel lives, time flippy type stuff. A good example of this is Life After Life by Kate Atkinson, where our main character Ursula dies many times throughout her life, but she keeps flipping back. So she'll die like as a child, and then it flips back and imagines, okay, if she hadn't died then what would happen, and then it kind of keeps flipping back and back. Another example of a book that does this is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, which is where we have a man who wakes up living in a parallel universe. And a third example is After the End by Claire Mackintosh, which again, it's very different to the other two books I've mentioned in this genre. Features parallel lives, and it's very, very good. Okay, so the third subgenre that I wanted to mention is Honkaku. So Honkaku is Japanese crime fiction, which is written in the style of Golden Age. So typically there is a defined pool of suspects, usually in an isolated location. Often there is a locked room or impossible puzzle element. A good example of this is the Decagon house murders by Yukito Ayatsuji. So this novel very much pays tribute to And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. It has some similarities throughout. It's not the same story, and the solution is not the same. We follow a group of university students who belong to a detective mystery club, and they are aficionados of classic crime fiction, and they have nicknames for each other. So I think one of them's like Agatha, one of them's Ellery, I think one of them's Carr. They go to stay on this deserted island where these series of murders have previously taken place, and they go to try to figure out what has happened. There is a locked room element to the story as well. My next example of Honkaku is the Moai Island Puzzle by Alice Arisugawa. Again, actually, this follows a group of university students who go to an island, originally to try and track down this treasure that's been hidden there through a series of puzzles, and one by one they start to die. And then another book in this genre I wanted to mention is one I actually haven't read yet, but I've had for a while. I need to get to it soon. It's Murder in the Crooked House by Soji Shimada. So this is set in a snowy, isolated location in Japan, in a maze of a house with bizarre deaths. So it sounds right up my street. Okay, next category. Next subgenre that I wanted to mention, I'm calling Post-Apocalyptic Dystopia. So my first example is Blindness by Jose Saramago, who is a Portuguese author who won the Nobel Prize for Literature. In Blindness, we have an epidemic where people all of a sudden go blind, and it leads to sort of the collapse of society, and it's more due to the government and societal response to the epidemic that causes the societal collapse rather than the epidemic in itself. So we move quite quickly to this post-apocalyptic sort of survivalist narrative. Saramago's writing style is really interesting. In this book, he doesn't give his characters names, and there are very long passages where punctuation is minimal. But I really thoroughly enjoyed it. There is a sequel which I haven't read because I'm not so keen on sequels. So, and then my second example of post-apocalyptic dystopia is The Water Cure by Sophie Mackintosh, which I believe was longlisted for the Booker Prize a couple of years ago. So in The Water Cure, we have a group of three sisters who are living with their parents on an island by themselves, because there's been some sort of disaster or something that's happened on the mainland, which means that they have had to escape to this island. We're led to believe that whatever has happened is somehow linked to men, and men are the cause of this. And the sisters are subjected to these kind of rituals or cures by the parents to try to keep them healthy, keep them pure. It's all a little bit ambiguous in terms of what's led up to this and what's happened, but it was a book I gave 5 stars. And the final subgenre that I very much enjoy is what I'm calling Gothic horror featuring creepy houses. So my first example of this is The Silent Companions by Laura Percell. I read this several years ago, and I just remember being really, really creeped out by it. So The Silent Companions, we follow a woman who is widowed, who goes to stay at the family estate of her late husband, and weird stuff starts happening in the house. The silent companions are things that people really did have in their homes, which were these like flat wooden creations that look like people. And I know that doesn't sound very scary, but in the novel, it's freaky. And so another example of Gothic horror featuring creepy houses is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I read this earlier this year. So we follow a doctor who has acquired a group of volunteers to go with him to this creepy house so he can do these like supernatural investigations. And the house in this novel is very much a character in the story. I like Shirley Jackson a lot, actually. I've read a few of her novels, some of her short stories, and I need to read more by her. This is very good. What she does in this, which I really like, is every so often there'll be like a gap in the narrative. So there'll be stuff happening, but then all of a sudden like characters will be in a different area or something will have jumped or changed. And I think she does that so you as the reader become disorientated. But it's really, really well done. Another example of a spooky house, obviously I couldn't not mention Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I don't think I really need to say anything more about that one. And also a book which I read fairly recently, which absolutely fits the theme of strange goings on in a creepy house, Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And again, the house in this book very much it's almost like a character in the novel. So that brings us to the end of the tag. If you guys have any recommendations for me in those specific sub-genres, please do let me know down below. I'm going to tag a couple of people who I don't think have done this tag before. That is Fraser Simons over at Springboard Thought, and also AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all well, and I'll speak to you all again very soon. Bye.